couple of other points that, Mr. Chairman, you asked me to address. I'm going to do that. This is information that came to you from Waste. That's the Wiregrass activist for clean energy. And I think Dr. Noll met with you, as he's met with Brad and I on a number of occasions, and presented some information to you. Part of that information that he presented to you that you asked me to look at was in his overview or fact sheet. He kind of captures what he calls air pollution emissions as stated in the permit, and he goes to list what those are. And what you asked me to clarify, and what I'm clarifying for you, is those are permit limits. Those are not emissions that would be released, because there are emission controls that are in place to make sure that those emission levels are well below what is acceptable by Georgia EPD, by the federal EPA, and the Clean Air Act. So those, I just wanted to verify that for you. And there is a copy of the air quality permit that I provided for you that shows you what those limits are and the emission controls that are in place that would keep those well below those limits. You also asked me to take a look at a couple of other things that you and Dr. Noll discussed, I believe. One was a letter that he presented to you in this packet that was dated November the 16th. That was from the American Lung Association of Massachusetts, and this was a Massachusetts-centric letter, and it was addressed to Senator Kerry. And the American Lung Association of Massachusetts, because of some issues with air quality that they have, then they're concerned about in 5 biomass plants operating in a very somewhat small area, and the fact that, according to their stated letter, Massachusetts, as other New England states, suffers from poor air quality and has some of the highest asthma rates in the nation. Anyway, he went on to talk about what some of the concerns were in Massachusetts, and I just wanted to just validate for you that those were from the Massachusetts Lung Association, and were specifically related to some issues there. Dr. Noll also presented a letter at the Information Exchange and panel discussion that came from the American Lung Association of Georgia. This was dated the 3rd of December. In which, and I'm going to take just a minute to go through this because I think it's very important that folks not be confused about what this letter says. It talks about burning wood or any burning substance releasing toxic chemicals and particles into the air, and they're concerned about particulate emissions, as we all are, and the effect that those emissions might have on all of us. Then talks about, goes on to say that particulate emissions are the most significant health threat they perceive from a biomass plant. And then they say without proper controls, combustion of wood or wood waste for power production could result in PM emissions that could be higher than acceptable levels. And then they also talk about the fact of age of vehicles and idling those vehicles while you're moving wood supply and biomass fuel supply in and out of the plant. They then go on to say that the American Lung Association supports measures to ensure the reduction or elimination of air pollution emissions from statutory sources, and they reference power plants, as well as industrial, commercial, and institutional boards. And that they support, as do we, stringent emission control requirements for these sources at the federal, state, and local level. They then go on to say, if a biomass plant is approved, then the American Lung Association urges the plant should be required to do the following 3 things. 1, install and use state-of-the-art pollution control devices, including best available pollution technologies. And that's exactly what Wiregrass Power is doing. In fact, they're putting 2 additional emission control devices on the operation of the plant that were not required by EPD. So that's been done. Second was use diesel vehicles and equipment, including in-plant equipment, such as emergency generators, that meet current EPA requirements for clean diesel equipment and fuel, and require any supplier to comply with those requirements as part of the contract with the supplier. That has been done. Wiregrass Power has stipulated that they will certainly do that. and that was in their operating plan anyway. And then the third point was maintain and enforce an anti-idling policy. And of course, Wiregrass probably stipulated that they will certainly in fact do that. So I'm happy to be able to tell you that the things that the American Lung Association in Georgia says that they urge be done with the operation of the plant, we can attest that those in fact have been done or will be met as we go forward. So you asked me to stipulate to that, and I'm certainly able to do that. And finally, one